Hello, everybody, and welcome back to our conference Walk the Talk. I hope you've had good lunch breaks, good conversations, good interactions, good communication to build towards action and investment in the things that really matter to all of us based on our faiths. Now, before we launch into this session, this plenary on loans, interest rates, equities, grants, and governance, I just want to apologize for some of the technical difficulties that some of you would have experienced in the parallel sessions that we had earlier. I know that the education one took some time to start, and I think there was a sudden finish to some of the other parallel sessions, so apologies. I hope you still had good conversations, and of course you're free to connect with people through the meeting function in the Hubelo platform. So let us begin this plenary, this session. When we're thinking about walking the talk and putting capital behind the things that matter, very often, despite very strong desires to deliver meaningful impact from both sides, there's a bit of a disconnect in understanding between the requirements and expectations of investors and entrepreneurs. And it's really important to get this common understanding so that capital can flow and it can be invested into impactful opportunities. So we have a good panel here of experienced speakers who will talk us through their experiences of what is required from their perspective and how entrepreneurs can set themselves up to be as attractive as possible for the investors who really want to support their causes. We will start, first of all, with Jean-Pierre, board chairman of DOB Equity, and also a board member of the Geneva Agape Foundation. Jean-Pierre, thank you so much for joining us, and over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Nana, and I'm very happy to be here and share with you some of my experience in working in Africa in the last 2 decades, and especially the experience with DOB, an impact investor in Eastern Africa. And Nana, before this meeting, you sent me a question and you asked me, what is the progress really that you've seen in Africa? And maybe that is the first one to address. And what I've seen, that is, despite that we hear often the more negative stories, that Africa has had a tremendous economic growth also in the last 20 years. Not in all the countries, but in many it did. And also the social cohesion has been improved in many countries. If we take, for an example, Kenya, it moved from a low-income country to a middle-income country, a tremendous growth. And we see that that's also the result of really stable politics and structural changes that have been driven by the government. At the same time, what we see is that in most countries, it's still fragile, and that longer efforts to keep the political situation stable and to have a sound governance is essential for the further growth of Africa and to give all the people who live there, and especially the young people, equal chances and the chance on a decent life. But we've seen many good things, and for an example, in Kenya, SDGs like reduced child mortality and universal school access have actually been met. Do we also see challenges? Yes, we do see challenges. Of course, that all the people can be educated well and have proper jobs. We see the challenge of climate change like everywhere in the world, but especially in poorer regions, it's hit harder, of course. So many challenges, but I think that Africa will strongly improve further as it did also in the last decades going ahead. I have prepared a little video because sometimes, pictures, films say more than words. And what I would propose that we look at that video, it takes 3 minutes and 30 seconds, which shows some of the companies that DOB invested in. I mean, in the end, that's the real thing. Entrepreneurs in Africa who start their own business, providing services that people really need. And these 22 companies that we invested in, I would like to give a glimpse of that. And then after that, say a few words, the 8 lessons learned that we did in the last 10 years. Would that be all right, Nana?
Thank you very much, Jean-Pierre. That would be great. Thank you, Hong.
Yeah, this was our Christmas and New Year video, and it gives an impression of the companies. And I wanted to share that with you because what you see, the great entrepreneurs who have set up these companies, we have assisted them in letting it grow, but it is really them and the people who work with them who make it grow. And the impact this has on the SDGs, like SDG 6, giving everyone access to water and sanitation, but also on the other SDGs, is great. Now, of course, investing is not that easy, and providing funding to companies is also not that easy. And if you give loans to companies, you want them to be bankable and credit worthy. You take a bit of a higher risk with equity. But still, what you always want are certain things. And I want to share 8 lessons that we learned. And 8 lessons also represents a new beginning, meaning a new order of creation in some religions. The first one is there are many good and impact-driven entrepreneurs in Africa, no doubt about it. Second, there are many markets with a great impact, like health, like food and agriculture, renewable energy, and education, who have great potential in Africa. Third, I think what we learned is that the entrepreneurs who had the impact first in their mind, were the most successful. However, you cannot run a company if you don't make a profit because you have to invest further. And so a company that doesn't make profit cannot grow, cannot further invest, is useless. Actually, it's worse than useless because then you disappoint people. So companies have to become profitable. It's not capitalism, it's just growth that you need to give people products and services. Then what we saw that is that many entrepreneurs need a little bit of assistance in making the company bankable or in making investable proposals, or later on in what we do, keeping the bookkeeping in order and go to a sound accounting system, and we provide that assistance. Now, many people say you shouldn't give assistance, but don't forget, in the EU, there is plenty of assistance for companies. Most companies can tap into certain resources, some funding for a certain kind of assistance. And that lacks a lot in Africa. Actually, that's better in Europe, while it should be the other way around. So if you have the chance, give the companies assistance. What we also learned is that companies that in the beginning, where we had a doubt about the shareholder structure or the capabilities of the management, but that we did it because we liked it so much, it never went well. If you have the doubts in the beginning, you better hold back and focus on the ones you don't have doubts with. That is a lesson that we learned. And then the 6th one is that we found that the companies that do the best actually work in a traditional sector, like they provide vegetables and fruit to the people, but combine it with digital technology, like apps where you can buy it or pay it, or we even a step further, good apps for the logistics. They have done the best. I think the 7th is you need first movers. You need banks, you need investment companies like DOB and others, LTG, also the Finnish one that is also present in this conference. You need them to step forward. And there I also think that religious organizations can be in the forefront and also can bridge the gap, like UNICAP. What we saw today is an organization that really can build bridges between financiers and organizations that need the money. The last one is, if you do impact investing, it's harder than normal investing, let's say. However, you can do it profitable, but you have to do it professionally. So Nana and all, that's a little introduction. Thank you very much.
Jean-Pierre, thank you for showcasing the opportunities and for running us through those key considerations and your lessons learned. And I just invite the audience that you're free to type your questions to the panelists. After they've presented, there will be plenty of opportunity for Q&A, so please do add your questions. Next, I would like to invite Bright from the All Africa Conference of Churches to speak to us about his experience. This time last year, I think that you were setting up a specific business unit, and I know that things have progressed significantly since then. So looking forward to your insights and observations with this year's opportunities. Thank you, Bright. Bright, I believe you're still on mute.
Yes, the All Africa, good afternoon, the All Africa Conference of Churches, we have realized in the continent that over the last 50 years, churches have received grants and donations and has made them to become dependent. So for the last 20, 30 years, we have set up what we call a strategic business unit, so that we divorce what is business from what is programmatic. And this strategic business unit specifically makes investments in real estate, in hotel management, in printing press. And that all these things are run specifically, and the profit that is generated is plowed back into the programmatic work of the All Africa Conference of Churches. So the education we have been given over the last 10, 15 years to our member churches in Africa is that they must divorce what is business from what is programmatic. And I agree with what Jean-Pierre said, so that if you are running a real estate business, if you are running a hotel, you run it with the mindset that the hotel, you run it like any other hotel and make a profit, and then you can use that to support or to subvent the expenses that you make for the programmatic work. In that case, you can sustain the diaconal work of the church into perpetuity, so that you don't rely on Sunday collections from school children in Europe, thinking that that will come forever and ever to support your mission work. KLM, the Catholic Church has huge investment in KLM. And some of the donor grants that are sent to Africa are out of the business entities that the Catholic Church has invested in, including that of KLM. And this is education that we have been giving to our churches in the continent. And we have experimented that, and it's what I talked about last year by this time in Geneva. I'll say that, I'll stop there by way of introduction.
Thank you, Bright. Thank you for that introduction. And I will come back to you with questions as to what you've been seeing specifically in terms of the financing and having that mentality that says you must run a business as a business.
Yeah.
Let me now invite Nicholas to speak to us as the Deputy General Secretary of Economic Development in the State of Geneva, Canton of Geneva, and also a member of the Building Bridges Initiative. Thank you.
Oops. Sorry, there is a technical issue here. Oh, here we go. Can you see me? Great.
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And I apologize for this little technical glitch. First of all, obviously, thank you so much for having me. And I'd like to wish everybody in the cybersphere, all of those who are listening to us today, a resilient, inspiring, impactful, and healthy new year. 2020 has been a special year, to say the least. Communities and our environment suffered from fires and floods of massive proportions. And then came COVID-19 and the pandemic, which had such a profound effect on our communities all over the world. And with all of this, the weaknesses as well as the interdependencies of our modes of functioning have been brutally exposed. And as the adage goes, there is really an opportunity in every crisis. But it seems to me that all those great challenges we are facing can't be tackled if we act and fight back separately with our old organizational business and investment models in mind. So are we going to focus on profit once again, or will we scale up to purpose-driven action? Do we each want to be the best in the world, or do we want to be the best for the world? Are we going to just talk, or are we going to walk the talk? And as the conference title suggests, we do indeed need a change of paradigm. We do need, in other terms, what I call P²7, public-private partnerships for people, planet, purpose, and profit. 7 Ps. So it is indeed suggested that we walk the talk, or perhaps even better, we should think about running the talk in order to boost innovative partnerships. And to illustrate this point, I'd like to share with all of you to give you an insight into 3 transformative projects we have initiated recently. And the first one is related to finance. And to introduce you to it, I'd like to cite a friend of mine from Nigeria, who once said to me that in a moment of crisis, the wise do build bridges and the fools do build dams. This first process I'd like to talk about is linking, finance related, is linking global governance and SDG implementation forces with sustainable impact and SDG financing. And it's called Building Bridges Week. We started this in 2019 in Geneva. And over 1 week, about 1,000 different actors in this sphere gathered to discuss how we can better link SDG implementation and global governance with the whole financing aspect to it. Great success, but we need to move much further than that. And this is why we started to think about the next stage in this process. We are in the process of preparing Building Bridges Week 2021, probably in November 21. We anticipate a much larger group of stakeholders present there. Asset owners will become key here. And I know full well how important faith-related investments and investors are and how much of a role they can play. And I really hope they will be much more involved in our next conference, Building Bridges Week 2021. The second initiative I'd like to share with you has to deal with trust. And to introduce you to it, I'd like to refer to Dylan Thomas, the Welsh poet's wise words. Dylan Thomas expressed it that way: when one burns one's bridge, what a very nice fire it makes. And so this second initiative is to deal with trust. And the point is the following: trust is an essential ingredient in all of human relations. But digitization, which has experienced a radical acceleration in the last 9 months because of the pandemic, carries on the one side many positive externalities, but it also allows us to foresee a whole series of negative consequences, potentially more and more harmful as they develop. I refer here to cybercrime, cyber warfare, the spread of hatred, the ability to censor or control, just to name a few. And in this context, the urgency to agree on the terms of a new contract between humanity and the technosphere is clearly palpable. Digital trust needs to be strengthened. It needs, to a certain extent, to be reinvented. And to make a difference, we have decided with Geneva and the neighboring regional government, we have decided to work together over the last 18 months to build the Trust Valley. The Trust Valley is a platform bringing together many stakeholders from the private and the public sector, plus academia, the civil society, to think and build the cornerstones of digital trust in the 21st century. Here again, I know full well how much the faith community has thought about what trust really means. And I very much expect that this initiative, truly multi-stakeholder and multidisciplinary, will be able to incorporate more and more players also from that very faith community. Last but not least, I'd like to talk about the third initiative. And the third initiative I'd like to mention here has to deal with data. And here I'd like to introduce you to it. I'd like to cite Isaac Newton. Newton once came up with this point. We build too many walls and not enough bridges. And on the data front, you really see more and more big walls being built up in a world which is more and more driven by data. The economy is driven more and more by data, but everything else is really impacted quite a lot by the way we can use, analyze, comprehend, and visualize data. Data, to make it short, is considered the new oil. But if we really want to use it, not just for profit, but also for purpose, we need to think about complementary approaches to the ones already existing. And this, to me, means we have to build a new digital commons to follow the spirit of the work that has been created by Nobel Prize winner Elinor Ostrom. These digital commons must be neutral, they must be non-biased, non-for-profit, and avant-garde to empower users, to make sure we can create new alliances around data analytics, around data visualization, to implement the SDGs, to give concretization to SDG 17, the partnerships for the goals. And to do that, to accelerate that capacity, we have worked very hard in the last 2 years now on creating a new platform, which is called IDE4, IDE4.ch. It's a foundation a platform we want to create here around information and data exploration for environment, economy, and enlightenment. This is now incubated at the Geneva Center for Security Policy and is there to address very specific needs for the global community to address the big problems of our time and to make them an opportunity for collaborative action. So once again, three initiatives, and I very much hope we can share more and get the faith community more involved in all of those. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Nicolas. And then, last but definitely not least, we come to Oscar from Lombard Odier Private Bank, based in Geneva, to also give his perspective on all of the money that is sitting within the private banking sphere and what can be done to mobilize it. Thank you. Oscar, you're still on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
You can hear me. Okay, good. Thank you for the invitation. I think since it's an official invitation linking it to Lombard Odier, I think just a minute to to highlight what Lombard Odier as a bank stands for and the origin of this bank. Lombard Odier was founded in 1796 as a partner, as a private bank since 1796. The origin is basically a combination of the families of Hench, Jean Lombard, and Charles Odier. These three great families are basically the founders of Lombard Odier. In 1831, that the bank was founded 1796. In 1891, this bank began as a partnership operating under the name Lombard Odier. In 1857, it co-founded the Geneva Stock Exchange. 1857, Geneva, 20 years before the opening of the Zurich Stock Exchange. Very, very important for our discussion today is actually the social responsibility in investing processes. I want to state here that Lombard Odier actually started social responsible investing as far back as 1997. In 2007, Lombard Odier became a signatory to the United Nations Principle for Responsible Investing and is a member of that body. Now, coming back to basically to the main theme of today, Lombard Odier as a bank, like I said, is a private bank. What we do basically is, like you correctly said, we are investing monies of various individuals. The objective of this relationship to our clients is to maximize the financial returns of their investments. Now the question is, how do we align that financial objective of maximizing clients' assets return with the expected social responsibility of the bank? How do you bring in the social responsibility expected of a bank like this with the financial return objectives expected from the clients? I want to mention that a private bank has to be differentiated from an investment bank. So a private bank, we're doing nothing but trying to invest clients' assets and trying to maximize the return from those assets. Now, we, as expected, we will need to fulfill some of the social responsibilities expected of a bank like ours. So, in a world of ours today, we are faced with a huge competition for the very little capital we have. So a lot of competition going on in terms of assessing the few capitals available for investment purposes for projects like the one we are talking about. Now, the question is, how are we able to get a bit of the portion of this global capital that is available, specifically for Africa, and link that to social responsibility? At Lombard Odier, we are participating in a number of initiatives, and we are investing through a number of our joint venture investment initiatives in Africa, in India, specifically in these two regions. I want to start, first of all, we have a huge investment which is ongoing in India called Vatana. So that investment in Vatana could have been in Africa, it could have been anywhere, but it is very, very important that some certain guidances and some certain frameworks are fulfilled to enable us to come in terms of partnering in investing in things like this. So remember, the monies we have is not ours. It belongs to some people, and we would want to invest this money to achieve the financial returns expected from the client, but at the same time, we are willing to achieve as well our social responsibility. So first of all, through various initiatives, we are invested in, we are supporting financially this project in India, and it is investment financing for education. So what we are doing there is to finance the improvements in educational infrastructure in India, helping the private schools with loans, especially to help them to expand their infrastructure and then help them training their teachers. So we have invested in this project. This is an ongoing project. We have as well invested in India and in Kenya in a project called Green Light Planet Group. So this is a group basically that is expanding the access across low-income homes to quality energy. Most of the African and Indian, majority of the African and Indian families, they don't have light, they don't have water, potable water. So through the Green Light Planet Group, we have invested with our alliances and our colleagues and our partners almost $10 million on how to enhance the availability of electricity, availability of potable water. This is an ongoing investment. That project is ongoing. It's ongoing in India and in Kenya. Then we have other leading developmental funds. We do not have the competencies and the capacities to get involved directly in this investment. So what we do is we do this through third-party joint venture partners. We are money managers. We would not claim to be gurus in some of these projects. So what we do is we align with the experts. So for example, we have a developmental fund called INCOFIN. In INCOFIN, what we have done is we have invested, that means we have given money to the managers of this fund. INCOFIN is a leading developmental fund. Investors there are mostly banks, insurance companies, pension funds. So we have given these people money to invest in emerging countries. And we provide investments only based on certain criteria. Those criteria has to be fulfilled before we are able to invest in such projects. And this is part of our investment process. Where do we invest the money? How do we guide that the money invested are done with the right things we expected the managers to do? And then we have another great investment, if I may just round up, in global funds. So we have invested hugely in global funds, where those funds are basically investing in how to ameliorate the effects of AIDS, tuberculosis, malaria. So this fund has the objective to specifically invest in this kind of health infrastructures. That is another area where we are very, very active. And a lot of other things we do, which we do through alliances and through the partners. Thank you very much.
Yeah, Oscar, thank you very much. Thank you all panelists. And we're getting a very interesting range of questions. So I'm going to go straight to our participant questions as I see them. And we're going to start with this question to you, Jean-Pierre. What are the big challenges you have seen with respect to scaling investment in Africa? And maybe Jean-Pierre to start and anybody else to contribute. Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Nana. And I saw the question and I also answered it by typing already a little bit to Vivek. And I think the first thing from the investor's point of view is you need to have patient capital. If you want to be in only for 3 or 4 years, that doesn't make sense. You need to be patient. With Tanga Fresh, we're in over 12 years now, and we don't have the intention to go out. So you need to have patience. That is one. I think the second one is that it is very handy if you can provide both equity, debt, sometimes grants, depending on what the company really needs, and that you provide also additional support, like getting the bookkeeping and the accounting up to standard. But then there is something else too, because what is also needed, that is a stable government, a government which is corruption-free, which has a sound governance, and which creates political stability and wants to create wealth and goodness for all the people. And what we see is in the countries where that happens for a long time, 10, 15, 20 years, you see that the economy in Africa is booming. But when that is distorted, then the real problems arise, of course. And Bright and I have often talked about this too. Bright, and I'm sure you have a vision on that also.
Yes, I do.
Please share it with us, Bright.
Yes, in addition to what Jean-Pierre said, it's also education. Allow me to quote Professor Christoph Stackelberger. In 2013, at the 10th General Assembly of the All Africa Conference of Churches, something related to education and changing the mindset. Christoph said, and I quote, "Long-term dependency on the goodwill of others violates dignity, but self-reliance combined with mutual partnerships of sharing increases dignity. If African churches and church-related institutions manage carefully and more productively the assets that they have as good stewards of the manifold gifts given by God to churches, it will be an important contribution to a life in dignity of African Christians and Christianity." So that because of colonialism, and when the missionaries came, the mindset was that everything was coming from Europe, from North America to the churches. Our churches developed, church leaders developed that kind of dependency mindset. So that, like what Jean-Pierre said, if we give proper education to bookkeeping, to how to be good stewards of the resources that we have, then we will be, in addition to what Oscar also has said, and I commend you, Oscar, for your bank, so that we do what is business, and then what is corporate social responsibility, we do that also from what comes out of the business operations. And as we go around the continent and we are educating our members, I quote this thing of Christoph consistently, because at that General Assembly, a resolution was passed that the churches in the continent must endeavor to be self-sufficient and use the resources that they have. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Bright.
You remember?
Sure.
Okay.
Thanks to you, your cooperation.
Now, Bright, there's an interesting follow-up here, which is how can churches in Africa use their assets as collateral to attract investment that will facilitate job creation? To start with you, Bright, and to open up to anybody else who has views on this.
It is very easy. The churches first must have board of trustees that will take care of their assets. When they have the board of trustees that are in charge of their assets, it means that they will take care of landed property, all investments, they will take care of it. And then they can register different aspects of the assets of the church and use it to obtain a loan from the bank to do business. But then, before then, there must be what I call a separate business unit of the church, so that when the business unit is going for a loan, for instance, the All Africa Conference of Churches, we have what we call the AACC Investment Trust, which is separated from the normal mission work of the AACC. So the loans that we take, all the developments that we undertook over the years, the loans were taken by the AACC Investment Trust. But then there is a structure in such a way that the AACC Investment Trust reports to the rank and file membership of the AACC, that is the General Assembly. So for churches, they can also set up a business wing that is structured in such a way that they report to the House of Bishops. I can take a typical example, the Anglican Church of Kenya. They have a very good setup, which they call the Church Commissioners. The Church Commissioners owns and register all assets of the Anglican Church of Kenya. Now, when a church or a diocese wanted a loan, the loan is applied for and administered by the Church Commissioners of Kenya. Then at the end of the year, all the investments that are made, the profit, the surplus, the House of Bishops, they meet and the profit is declared. And then the profit is now distributed among the dioceses, either for expansion of the church, for the purchase of pews, or for bishop salaries, or for the development of the church. So there must be a separation between the normal mission work of the church and what is the business wing of the church. That is the number one. Then the assets of the church must be registered in the name of the business wing, but there must be a structure in such a way that the business wing does not run away with the property of the church, where the archbishop, in the case of the church in Kenya, the archbishop is the one who presides over the board of the church commissioners. So there is that kind of accountability.
I mean, you raise an interesting point, and there was a question here about whether the assets, what assets should be used to fund ministry versus assets used to fund entrepreneurship and job creation. And clearly, with your method and the structure, there's a separation in terms of how both should be driven. But I have a bit of a question to you and also to Oscar in terms of whether I'm correctly hearing the clear separation between maximizing profits in one end and doing the socially right thing in another, and whether there isn't a way to bridge both, so that there's an importance of having both profit and purpose and not necessarily promoting one over the other. I mean, as Jean-Pierre said earlier, sustainability is key, but there's a difference between sustainability and profit maximization. And I just love to kind of explore that a little bit, maybe starting with Oscar, a small response to that point, and then we'll come back to the questions.
Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. I think it's very important to state here that in aligning financial returns with social responsibility, I personally believe that sustainability will become the biggest single driver of return going forward. If we look at the pattern of discussions around social responsibility, ESG practices, and the rest of them. I just cannot see how a given company will be able to drive its return if it is not practicing or if it is not producing social responsible returns. I do not expect a divergence from both. Rather, I would expect that as time moves on, the issue and the discussions will not be anymore on the financial return generated by a given entity for the shareholders or for the clients. More and more weight would be apportioned to the returns generated through a sustainable means. So for me personally, I don't see, I see basically sustainability as the biggest driver of the future return of every entity.
Thank you. Thank you, Oscar. There's another question.
Can I add to what Oscar said? I think we are here distinguishing between what is normal profit and what is abnormal profit, as we all studied in economics. I think the sustainability here that Jean-Pierre talked about and Oscar, and what even we are doing at the AACC, we are talking of normal profit, but it's not like the private sector where they make abnormal profit. That is where I think we have to make a distinction. So we don't make abnormal profit, but we make normal profit. Profit that is, it will enable us to be able to meet overhead costs and plow back part of it into the business.
Thank you, Bright. Thank you for that. Now, there's a question here on business models, and I might start with you, Nicola, in terms of answering this one. So all the speakers have talked about the importance of businesses having purpose and generating profit. Has anybody considered or engaged with business models founded on distributed ownership structures, such as cooperatives? And Nicola, I'm starting with you because it was interesting, the concept of the digital commons, and whether other innovative approaches have been taken in your dialogues and building bridges. So I'll start with you, then open it up to anybody who would like to respond.
Thank you so much, Nana, for this excellent question. And before I get into the business models and sort of shared concepts, I'd like to say here that this whole movement around Building Bridges Week and how to link the finance world with the global governance world just shows to me how much of an extraordinary positive trend we are undertaking here. We would have talked about this like 3-4 years ago, having so many stakeholders coming together and looking at this new normal of purpose being associated with profit. We would have been luminaries. There was a hope we would get in this direction. But that has accelerated now. And there is also a generational change with younger people, fortunately, really linking very, very strongly the purpose-driven side of the investment with the profit side of the investment. And my take is very clearly, as a company nowadays, if you want to have a bright future, you really have to have this not as a communication element, a risk management side of things, but something that goes much further. Now on the commons, what I see simply is this extraordinary movement towards trying to just reinvent business models. The non-profit sector starting to talk and reinvent new ways to function with the for-profit sector. alliances are created in many different ways, and there is no real limit to this. That's fantastic. And to me, again, if we want to find new solutions, innovative solutions to these big problems we have to face, it's not going to be enough to have the governments dealing with things, or the private sector dealing with things, or the foundations playing their role. We all will have to push together. And I'd like to say here as well that what gives me a lot of hope is I see more and more movements within the faith community, because this is central to our conference, of discussions. I'd like to come back to the Zug discussion that happened in 2017, and how we can start creating more formidable alliances in between different faiths. We all, if we work together, we have this extraordinary chance to form more unified consortiums and start creating a more strong bloc, which will lean positively towards creating new models. Again, to me, the 21st century, if we want to succeed, has to be more about co-innovation, co-creation, co-petition as well, and all of these together hopefully will lead us where we need to go. And I think that's very new as well, huh? We are all in a race together, but it's not a competition. We have no other choice but to cross the finishing line all together. So we either do it together and we have a chance of succeeding and turning these big challenges of our time into opportunities for all of us, not for the few, for the many, or we will be in a much more difficult situation. That gives me hope, because I feel great amounts of energy in this year.
Thank you, Nicolas. Now, there is an interesting question here. I think I'll open it up to anybody who wants to answer, about the fact that innovative solutions, as developed by the West, have often been a mixed blessing. So tech data has been used to polarize. Plastic containers provided convenience, but also pollution. Capital flows have increased inequality. And so what are the lessons, or how can we learn the lessons and the mistakes from how innovation has been done elsewhere, and how can we make sure we don't repeat them and keep them out of the investment vehicles that we're all trying to build? Jean-Pierre, I'll let you start.
Thank you, Nana, because it's an excellent question, of course, and an incredibly important question. And it's also a difficult one, because it's a complicated one, and often it's not right or wrong, but somewhere in between. Now, I think that with plastic, as an example, we should really learn from what we did wrong there in the West, and what we did wrong there with plastic, or with other pollution, that we don't bring that to other regions in the world. That is very clear. But often there are dilemmas, like should you bring milk to people who are not used to drinking milk, like what we do with Tanga Fresh and with Countryside Dairy? I think so, but you could also think differently. But I think you should always have that discussion as an investor, and have a kind of committee, which you can call an ethical committee or a sustainability committee, where you have wise people from all over the globe to discuss that you do things environmentally and socially sound. And then still you will make mistakes. But I think the question is excellent, and we should all address it.
Right.
Yes, Nana, thank you. And thank you, Jean-Pierre, for that response. I think, linked to what Nicolas has said, we need to focus on, as faith-based organizations, also build into our business model what we call ethical investments. Ethical investment in the sense that if the investment we are making is destroying the environment, if the investment we are making, and this is a very broad term, it borders on corruption, it borders on climate destruction, it borders on the environment. So as part of the business model, we should have ethical investment as part of so that it's not just investment for its own sake. For instance, in Africa now, they are talking of the PPP, public-private partnership agreements for road construction for projects. But what you see is that most of these public-private partnership agreements do not respect the environment. They destroy the environment, and that is not ethical. So as faith-based organization, this is something we must champion. We collaborate with people, but we must emphasize that whatever we are doing has ethics built into it. And there are several examples one can give, from Sierra Leone to Liberia and to other parts of Africa.
Thank you for that, Brighton. And actually leads into an interesting, sorry, Nicola?
Yeah. Can I just start? Because the question is too great. The question is too great not to be addressed. Innovation processes fundamentally need to change, in my opinion. And there are some very interesting concepts out there that we should possibly revisit. The first one that comes to my mind is a concept called Jugaad. And Jugaad is a concept from South Asia, which relates to frugal innovation. The fact that you don't necessarily need an incredible amount of capital and 5 degrees or PhDs to really get into this. What I mean by that is we have to move away from a very elitist kind of approach to innovation, which means we have an enormous capacity from people from all walks of life, from many different specializations, people who don't necessarily have a great amount of education in the traditional sense of the term, but perhaps have fabulous knowledge, practical knowledge on some other elements. And we have to try to find ways to empower them. We have to try to find a way to get their ideas into the mainframe, so that we can lift their ideas up. And that really brings me to this incredibly important attention we need to have on more open innovation.
Okay.
And here again, I come back to this point about not just for profit, but purpose-driven innovation. And if we can create more collective intelligence, more open innovation, more agile ways to lift up these ideas for the larger communities, we can really create fabulous new solutions for the world.
Thank you, Nicola, for the important point that you make around maximizing the opportunity for everybody to participate in solving the problems that we face. Oscar, I have a question or a couple of questions for you, which are an interesting balance. So there is a recognition that if you look at the origins of Lombard ODA, founding families have been motivated as Protestant families of Geneva. So what role should values and faith play in modern private banking? But then that is put against the fact that quite often Swiss banks are notoriously known as safe havens for illicit income. So how do you marry the current reputation of many Swiss banks with the foundations of the Protestant faith that perhaps could be revived inside the industry? To you, Oscar, and you're on mute currently, Oscar.
Okay, thank you very much. You can hear me now. Personally, with my African background, most often faced with questions like this, which I am always happy to discuss. I think there is a great misunderstanding in what a Swiss private bank as an institution is doing. I do not want to generalize that, you use the word illicit. In today's world, we know that one of the most difficult things for you or for any illicit asset, one of the most difficult things is to bring an illicit asset into a Swiss banking platform. I know this exactly from experience. It's not just about the regulatory pressures on the banks. It's about the fines and the reputational damages that goes with, news or information coming into the public space that Bank A or Bank B has or is associated with an illicit asset. So I can confirm to you and the participants from my personal experience as a banker, now 22 years in this business, I have seen successive tightening of regulations and compliance requirements to evidence for every single asset, every single money that comes into a Swiss bank. There are laid down regulatory processes to ascertain that these monies are not from illicit origins. But I do understand, it's a very well-known spoken issues about Swiss private banks and corrupt and illicit money. But I can confirm to you, not just the regulatory pressure that stops or hinders flowing illicit assets out of Africa or wherever into Switzerland. There's very tight regulatory requirement against that. There is constant auditing from the regulatory bodies to ascertain that these things doesn't happen. So whoever is sharing the opinion that Swiss safe haven for illicit assets, I can only say that that person is not talking out of experience.
Thank you for that, Oscar. And Bright is just going to follow up.
Yeah, before I mean, the earlier speaker said this is a very important topic, especially when it comes to the ethical investment. And here we must give credit to a Geneva-based organization, Global Ethics Net, which is associated also with Christophe. I mean, he was the founder. Over the last, say, 4 or 5 years, Global Ethics Center have been championing how churches should use their assets. And there is a reservoir of knowledge, of wealth of knowledge at their website, which we can all actually use. I don't know whether we have anybody from Global Ethics Net on this conversation so that they can even add more. In fact, the one that is coming up now for this year is talking about how to actually bring together all the knowledge in the past and even come out with advocacy strategies in the continent, because corruption is what is destroying. I'm talking now as an African, if there's any African listening to this, is what has destroyed this continent. And we have lived with a mindset of philanthropy for so many years. And even when we get resources, we do not use the resources well. So for me, the issue of ethically investing in Africa is so important. And I want to commend the Global Ethics Net for championing this cause in the continent. If there's anybody else on the program who can even speak to it, and Madam Chair, Nana, if there is time, you can let them speak to this because it's so dear to my heart.
Thank you, Bright. Christophe, do you want to comment on this very briefly before we wrap up? Christophe, you're on mute. Christophe, you are on mute.
Sorry. Yeah, if you like, I can briefly mention what Bright said. There is a program, African Asset Management Program, which ACAP, which is in fact, there to improve the management, the governance of church assets. African Church Assets Program, it's called. And I think what Bright said, I can only confirm this value-driven or ethical component to strengthen that. And also what Oscar said, the regulatory part is one, but behind the regulation, we need the conviction of the actors. If it's only done because we fear to be in jail or to have a reputation risk, we see that it's not enough, because as soon as the pressure from the public or from the regulator is lowering, then the criminals see the spring blossoming, you know. So we need this inner conviction and values, and that's why I think banks like Lombard and others survived or have a sustainable model over 200 years. That's not forgiven. Many banks in this period collapsed, and to sustain for 200 years can only be done if you have very solid inner intrinsic motivation of doing the right thing. And that's what I would support that. And also what Jean-Pierre said and Nicolas, that means we need regulation, we need punishment, we need all the instruments we have in law and economy in the market, but we need also this kind of strong inner conviction which does the right thing even if nobody sees it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Christophe. Jean-Pierre, Bright, Nicolas, Oscar, thank you so much for your participation on this panel. I'll just tell all the attendees that there were some questions that we didn't get to. Please feel free to find all of the speakers and the list of attendees and to chat and to ask your questions specifically. And there are other breaks coming on later today where you can arrange to meet and chat. So thank you all so much for your participation. And we're continuing on. The next session is actually hosted by Faith Invest, moderated by one of my colleagues, and with another colleague as a speaker. So I hope you'll stay on and learn a bit about the interfaith, multi-faith approach. Thank you.